Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Titan insider Terry McCormick and typically Chris Yao, secondary contact Blaine Kellar here with you today, filling in for Chris. Terry, glad to be on. We've got a great show planned after week 2 of the Titans season.
Yeah, a lot of similarities to week 1. Same final score. Titans come up short, 24-17. Some of the same sort of mistakes. Will Levis still going through the hard growing pains of learning what it's like to be an NFL quarterback and having a team on his shoulders, and then also the special teams disasters and the team not being able to get any takeaways on defense. There were some bright spots. We'll include that too, but by and large, it's a little bit of the same lingering feeling that people came away with after the Chicago Bears game that are prevalent this morning, Blaine.
Yeah, you had the block punt, defensive takeaways, still searching for that first one of the season. The running game looked good in spurts, and then Will Levis, of course, having that once again a play that was just kind of inexplicable.
Yeah, it really was. And it's, one that Levis himself really didn't have much of an explanation for in the post game. And I'm sure Brian Callahan, we all saw what the TV cameras caught of him on the sideline in the aftermath of that. And it wasn't pretty. But I think it's back to the drawing board and back to trying to get some of that stuff out of him. We'll take our first break here and come back with Nick Suss, our special guest, beat writer from the Tennessean.
Being a part of a cooperative is being a part of something bigger. Farm Credit Mid-America is a customer-owned lender that specializes in agricultural financing for farm real estate, operating, and farm equipment. A unique benefit of being a part of the Farm Credit Mid-America Cooperative is our patronage program, which has put over $1 billion back in our customers' hands over the last 7 years. That's the power of a cooperative. Visit us at fcma.com to learn more.
I own the land.
I farm the land. Together we're farmers. This is our cooperative.
Blaine Kellar, Terry McCormick, and the Tennesseans' Nick Suss here on the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Nick, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Yeah, happy to be here, y'all.
Nick, let's get right at it. I mean, we all saw what happened yesterday with Will Levis, with special teams, with a lot of the problems that this team had in coming up short for the second straight week. Do you think these problems, are they fixable, or is this something that this is just not a very good football team right now that's trying to, meander through and figure things out?
I kind of lean the latter. I don't necessarily think that their identity is that they are bumbling, stumbling, bad football players. Like, I think that this team has some sort of talent that can be capitalized upon. I kind of take umbrage with this idea that, this was the same game as last time. Some of the mistakes cropped up, but I did see progress in the areas that probably matter more. Now, turnovers are going to be the things that swing games. And if your team is number 1 in the NFL in turnovers committed and worst in the NFL in turnover differential like the Titans are right now, you're going to lose a lot. And that's what's happening. But if you look at these 2 games, I would say week 1 was a loss because of extremes. You play really well and then you play really poorly in all phases. This was a loss because of identity. I don't think they ever played really, really well like they did in the first half against Chicago. I don't think they ever played really, really poorly like they did in the second half against Chicago. They just kind of played, and they're trying to find that identity. They're trying to forge what they are, and I don't think they have it yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that to a certain extent. And I also think that after the Levis fumble, and then the interception, which I'm not pinning the interception on Levis per se. Maybe he shouldn't have thrown that ball in that situation, but I also put some of the culpability on Treylon Burks that he should have made a better effort to come down with the football. But I do feel like that for a time in the second quarter and in the third quarter, it felt like Brian Callahan dialed things back a little bit and maybe was trying to protect Will Levis from himself. Did you ever feel that?
To an extent, but I look at the biggest play of that third quarter was a 40-yard bomb into double coverage. Like, there were some plays and there were some series that were conservative. And I don't think the running game ever really got going to a point that you could have considered it established on Sunday. I don't know if there was too much you could have built off of there. So some of the conservatism might have just been a product of not getting very much push, not getting very much downfield momentum to build those 2nd and 4s, 2nd and 5s they want to have. But yeah, some of it is Will is taking the baby steps, and this team is not pushing the ball super downfield other than 2 or 3 shots per game to Ridley. Boyd's not getting nearly as involved as I thought he would be at this point. Hopkins obviously is still on some sort of pitch count, whether the team wants to acknowledge it as such or just let the fans see he's getting 1 target a game. I don't know. I think that this passing offense isn't where it needs to be yet, but I understand the factors that are leading to it rather than just saying, well, it's broken, start over, which nobody here is saying, but I understand that impulse after 2 bad games of, well, what can be changed? What can be changed? It's not about what's going to change. It's about what's going to improve.
Nick, Will Levis looked really good extending some plays last week, and I think he's shown that in the early portions of his career, but it's also where he gets himself in trouble when he extends those plays. How do you kind of assess that based on the 2 obviously low-light plays that he's had to start this season, but also plays like Sunday where he's able to escape a sack and turn that into 13 yards?
Yeah, one of the hardest things to overwrite when you are a football player like Will Levis is the evidence that got you to where you are. And I think about him playing high school football in Connecticut, not exactly a hotbed of talent, and then playing in the SEC at Kentucky, not exactly the powerhouse program where you have the same degree of talent as your competition. When Will Levis's teams were winning games at the lower levels, it was because of Will Levis. Like, these are habits that were instilled of he was the best player on the field anytime he took the field when he was in high school. And most times he took the field when he was in college. So when your success matrix tells you we win when I do things on my own, it's kind of hard to reconfigure and think we win when I operate as one of 11, which is what Callahan wants from him. And that's why Levis is saying he needs to rewire his brain. He is a guy who is so used to winning because he makes the plays that now he's trying to do that. And that's kind of contributing to his downfall.
It's really, when you bring that point up, it's really a somewhat similar dilemma to what they faced with Malik Willis, because he won at Liberty when he just took off and either found an opening or found an open receiver who'd broken free from coverage. And so there is a similarity, a correlation there between what Malik Willis was coached to do at Liberty and what the Titans were trying to coach out of him, and what Will Levis maybe was coached at Kentucky and other places, and what the Titans are now trying to coach out of him.
Yeah, no, I think that there's some similarity there. I think that the main difference is, of course, we were talking a little bit before the show about what Will faced at Kentucky, what SEC people were saying. I was covering the SEC back then. The book on Will has changed. It's strange that Will brought this up post-game. When people were talking about Will making mistakes in college, when they were talking about him being impulsive, it was throwing into triple coverage. It was throwing into tight windows. And Will acknowledged this after the game. He says, hey, look, I thought I fixed this problem. I thought I fixed this idea of don't force passes, don't push balls where they don't belong. And I think the 3 of us can acknowledge that really hasn't happened this season. You look at these 2 games, I don't think he's made a single pass where I thought, oh, why is he throwing that football? There were some during the 2-minute drill last night that might have been a guy trying to make a play. There were some during the 2-minute drill against Chicago where your back's against the wall. You got to try and make a play. But more or less, he's being smart with the football when it comes to operating through the offense. What he's not doing is being smart with the football when it comes to letting a play die. And I think that's probably an easy fix, but the fact that it hasn't been fixed yet is still a concern.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think that is in essence what people are, talking about this morning and determining, is this guy, is this just the way he's wired, to use his word, or is this something that can be fixed? And if it can be fixed, then how do you go about that? How do how do you train a guy to go against what maybe his instincts are? The thing that I guess that I go back to, in this is, and a guy who, one of the Jets beat writers brought this up to me after the game in the press box. He just said that he doesn't feel like Levis is processing his decision-making quickly enough at times with what he's seeing at the line of scrimmage and what he's seeing as the play unfolds. I think that there's probably some truth to that. I also think that as he gets more comfortable at seeing NFL defenses and as he gets more comfortable in this system, that should improve, but there's no guarantee of that.
I might push back on that a little bit. I don't think that processing is necessarily the issue here. Definitely not pre-snap stuff. Like, if we're talking about the mistakes he's making, most of it is at the end of a play when something's broken down, like Blaine's alluding to. And that's off-schedule football. The on-schedule football, the mistakes he's making are just physical errors of overthrowing a receiver or putting the ball behind somebody. Like, those are processing to a degree because it's timing. But I don't think of it as mental processing, as he doesn't know where the defense is. He can't find things. He's not seeing ghosts out there, to use the Sam Darnold parlance. I think what's happening is he is really, really strong when things are going right. And he is still not where he needs to be when things don't go right.
Yeah, and I'd go back to the early portion of Sunday's game. He started 8 for 8 passing. I think he had 4 different receivers. The run game was looking pretty well. And they had a chance, the Titans did, to go up 2 scores. Found themselves in the red zone. And why was that? Because everything was on schedule. The running game was setting up the passing. And he wasn't trying any crazy deep shots down the field. I think to that point, he only had 2 attempts over 20 yards. So everything was really high completion, high percentage completions, and like you were saying, on task kind of football.
It's kind of to me like, those recipes on the back of like a pancake mixture box. And if you follow it, you're going to get like a really average pancake. It's not going to taste that great. It's just going to be like, yeah, that's a pancake. That's what the box told me to make. Like, that's kind of what the Titans want, is a really mediocre pancake right now. Because like, if you don't follow the instructions and you do too much, you're going to make really bad mistakes and it's going to end up tasting way too strong. If you don't follow the box and you don't do enough, nothing's going to happen. You're just going to stall out. Like, there is a happy medium sometimes. And sometimes the best offenses are the blandest ones, are the ones that just do what they're supposed to do, get 6 yards at a time, chunk forward, chunk forward. I said it after that first scoring drive yesterday. That was what the offense looked like when things were working during training camp. When things were working, it wasn't, 70-yard play here or big run here or this. We love fixating on the big plays. But when this offense is at its best, it's 6 yards here, 7 yards here, 3 yards here, 10 yards here. No penalties, no negative plays. You're moving forward. And I think that's what this offense needs to do. Yeah.
Which is kind of how it looked at the preseason finale against New Orleans. That kind of got everybody excited and saying, hey, maybe there's something here. So I think that you're exactly right. And you're saying that, yes, this is going to be a passing offense. And yes, there will be some explosive plays mixed in. But by and large, it's basically taking what's there, not asking for a whole lot more at this juncture of Levis's development.
Yeah, and you can ask for more from a input perspective, but from output, the experience needs to be just don't make mistakes. When these Titans aren't making mistakes, the offense is pretty okay. Like, I'm not saying they're the Chiefs yet, they're not the Bengals yet, but the offense has, when the mistakes have been limited, been pretty solid. They got into the red zone or scored 5 times yesterday. And that's not a huge number, but if you get into scoring position 5 times in a game, you're probably pretty comfortable with where you are in year 1 of a new scheme.
All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about the special teams problems. And I have a theory about this. I think that when we saw the roster overhaul that Rand Carthon put forth on this roster this offseason with, about half the roster being new guys, I think we knew that not all of the holes could be fixed in one offseason. There were still going to be an area or two where, okay, maybe they're not strong enough here to, have this guy contribute a whole lot, or what needs to be contributed here. I think they did a pretty good job of fixing offense and defense and getting capable starters in most spots. I think special teams is the area maybe where they're still lacking a little bit personnel wise. I know they want to blame it on a missed block here and a missed assignment there and things like that for the back-to-back block punts. But I think that in the overhaul of this roster, depth is an obvious concern at a number of positions: inside linebacker, offensive line, and where do depth guys play? It's on special teams. And I think that's why you're seeing some of these problems.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I don't want to sound the most new agey, new schooly guy possible, but I'd rather be bad on special teams than offense or defense. I know it's aggravating to be bad on special teams. I know it's a play that can swing a game, but these are fluke plays. I'm not saying they're flukes in that they're accidents. They're flukes in that even the worst special teams in the world don't give up blocked punts every single week. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the Titans are defining a new level of ineptitude and we're going to see 17 blocked punts in 17 games. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that more or less you're probably going to see one more this year, at most two more. Like, this isn't a thing that you should. Oh, there's a cat on my lap. Hey, cat.
Special appearance from Nick Suss's cat.
Yeah, I just, again, the depth is an issue. You're right. This team doesn't have as much depth as it once did. But
no cats were harmed in the making of this podcast.
But if you look at the way that they made these moves, especially in the last couple of weeks of training camp, you trade Elijah Molden, you let Hassan Haskins walk, you resign Luke Gifford to the practice squad. I think he'll be up on the 53 in a couple of weeks. But like a lot of these best special teamers, those sacrifices were made for what? To make extra space to bring in Ernest Jones, to make extra space to sign Quandre Diggs to the 53. Like, the fact that they have arguably the NFL's best defense through 2 weeks while sacrificing the fact that they have the worst punt unit in the league, I take that, even if it's really, really aggravating to give up blocked punts.
2 questions for you on that, Nick. First, what's the name of the cat?
Reese.
All right. And secondly, still, you can, acknowledge the defense is tops, in the league in some categories and has been really impressive these first 2 weeks. But how much do you trade that for the fact that they haven't been able to get a turnover yet?
It's tough because I do not think that turnovers are flukes, but I do think turnovers are more luck-based than we give it credit for. Like, footballs are shaped weird, and it's hard to get them where you want them to go. Like, if footballs were circular, the game would be a lot different, and they bounce predictably. Footballs don't bounce predictably. Fumbles are hard to recover. You look at the first game in Chicago, I think there were 4 balls batted at the line of scrimmage, maybe 3 balls batted at the line of scrimmage. One of them goes straight up in the air, but the closest person to it is Tavondre Sweat, and he's not quick enough to get to the ball. Like,
right. And one was caught by Rome Odunze for a first down.
Yeah. You look at these things of, those are turnover worthy plays. And I think that if you look at turnover worthy plays, the Titans are probably middle of the pack in the NFL in making defensive plays that could result in turnovers, whether it's hitting a quarterback from behind, or whether it's batting a ball into the air, or whether it's forcing a fumble, which the fumble Velus Jones week 1 doesn't count, but that technically is a turnover in my book, even though it happened on special teams. I think that operationally what you can ask from a defense is limit yards, limit points, get off the field on third downs. The Titans defense is doing those 3 things well. And then turnovers year over year, game over game, really, really tough to find a trend line on. So you try and make them, and I think the turnovers are going to come. But I think that if you ask me, would you rather be forcing a lot of turnovers and giving up a lot of yards, or not giving up a lot of yards and not creating a lot of turnovers? The latter is the better scenario.
Well said. Well said. Nick, thanks for being with us. We'll see you later today at the press conference. Take a little break. We'll be back to have our stock report and our stat stuff.
He shoots, and he scores!
Special thanks again to the Tennesseans Nick Suss and his cat Reese for joining us on the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Terry McCormick and Blaine Kellar here. Time to give some evaluations from last week, I guess, now lost to the Jets. Terry, what do you got?
All right, let's do our stock up and stock down. Okay, stock up. I'm going with two guys who played in the middle of that defense yesterday, and that's Ernest Jones making his first start after being a backup and learning the defense during week one, and Kenneth Murray. Together, the two of them had 17 tackles yesterday. That certainly makes the middle of the defense much more athletic, much more able to move around and make plays. And also, some of that credit has to be given with those guys having so many tackles. That tells you that Jeffrey Simmons, Tavondre Sweat, Keandre Coburn, those guys are doing their job at the front level of the defensive line to occupy blockers, which allows the linebackers to have free run at ball carriers and make tackles. Because they're getting, they're able to come off the second level, Jones and Murray get to the ball carrier uninhibited by blockers because the interior of the defensive line is doing a good job occupying those centers and guards. So that's one stock up. The other stock up here, I'm going to go with a guy that struggled in week one, but was much better, especially in pass protection in week two, and that's left tackle J.C. Latham. Didn't hear his name called much yesterday. Did a decent job in protection. I think gave up one pressure after giving up 5 the week before. So certainly some improvement there from J.C. Latham. And then the other stock up, got to go with Calvin Ridley. We've been waiting for Calvin Ridley and Will Levis to get on the same page on the deep ball. Finally happened yesterday. Now, didn't happen on the first try because the ball went right through Ridley's hands. So they were actually 0 for 3 after having been 0 for 2 against Chicago. The misfired on the first one because the ball went through Ridley's hands. But then came up big as Ridley made a great concentration catch between two defenders, and Levis put it right on the money for that 40-yard touchdown. Now we go to stock down. Got to go with Levis. Another mistake. I know he played better, but another fatal mistake that really cost the Titans points in the red zone. Just cannot have those sorts of things. It's being discussed everywhere in terms of those who talk about the Titans, and we are no exception. As you see the picture that Angie Flatt got from yesterday's game, kind of says it all. Kind of says it all. And then, of course, there's the special teams. We talked about that with Nick. How that, the block punts have become an issue. Brian Callahan certainly exasperated by that as well, said that in 6 years he couldn't recall ever having a block punt. Now he's had 2 in back-to-back weeks. Actually, the Titans in the last 3 games of Ryan Stonehouse have had 3 block punts in those 3 games, plus another one that he never even got the ball off because he got crunched and was out for the season. So certainly an area that has to be fixed sooner rather than later. And finally, our last stock down, and I know a lot of, I don't know that I really want to go there, but I got to. Traylon Burks. Traylon Burks is still not a factor for this team. On the deep ball that was intercepted, ball was in his hands. The defender ripped it out as he's coming down. Traylon Burks has to make sure that if he can't catch the ball, no one catches the ball. And just didn't get the job done.
Yeah, Terry, want to touch briefly on one of your stock ups there, talking about the linebacker play. Of course, Ernest Jones and Kenneth Murray played really well, combining for those tackles. I think 17, like you said, and then a couple of tackles for loss. But that touchdown pass in that game from Aaron Rodgers to Breece Hall, I think on a wheel route or some sort of concept like that, Kenneth Murray is in pass protection there. I think both of these guys are really well-acclaimed tacklers, but the questions for them defensively has been in pass pro.
Yeah, and that's certainly an area that, obviously the Jets saw that. That matchup was there earlier in the game in the first half, and they didn't go to it. Kenneth Murray split out wide trying to cover Breece Hall. And most of the time, a running back on an inside linebacker is a mismatch. And Aaron Rodgers obviously saw that, took advantage of it, made a great throw. Hall came down with a great catch. Actually, I really don't fault Murray too much for that because he had decent coverage, but Rodgers, being the veteran that he is, just put it right there on the money, and Hall went up and made a play for him. So, I know that that's probably an area that, is going to need some work, but actually Murray did okay. Just the Jets made a better play.
Do you give a stock up to Tony Pollard if Tajay Spears' injury to the ankle is any worse than what it actually is? Maybe finally getting more of a carved out role while the two have quote unquote split snaps at running back?
Yeah, I mean, Pollard had 62 yards rushing yesterday, but sort of like Nick said earlier, the Titans never really got the run game established the way they wanted to yesterday. And I don't know if that was something that the Jets were doing or if that's just they couldn't get in a rhythm with the offensive line. I know they had a lot of 3 and outs and just could not seem to maintain any sort of rhythm in the run game. But who knows if Spears is going to miss some time and Pollard's going to become, the primary ball carrier for the next few weeks, then we shall see, what that entails and how much that adds to his workload and how much that adds to his numbers. Speaking of numbers, let's talk about our stats. We talked about the Jones and Murray having 17 tackles. Harold Landry had 2 sacks yesterday. And then on the downside, DeAndre Hopkins, they've got to figure out a way to get the football in his hands more often. Second straight week, only 1 catch. Targeted twice. Once he made a nice catch to help put them in position to get down deep into Jets territory. Then on 2nd and goal, really did not have much of a chance as Levis was kind of on the run and threw it a little bit wide of him. He didn't have much chance to make that catch. But they've got to get more targets going for DeAndre Hopkins.
Brian Callahan said post-game, Calvin Ridley's game has come. Of course, the 77 yards receiving, the 15 yards rushing, the 2 touchdowns on Sunday. He said hopefully DeAndre Hopkins' day will come soon as well. That'll wrap us up on the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Thanks again to Nick Suss for joining us. Thanks to Terry McCormick for having me on. And we'll see you throughout this week. And next Sunday, the Titans take on the Green Bay Packers.